Hello and welcome to Nailed on FPL with John and Kris. In preparation for Gameweek 18, we know that many of you have activated the free hit chip. And with that in mind, we want to talk about what our drafts are going to look like and some of the priority players we're going to be targeting from a value perspective and from a kind of points potential perspective. So we're going to jump straight into it. And we're going to start by going through each of the different positions, starting with goalkeepers. So Kris, in the goalkeeper slot, who are we looking for this free hit draft team?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of options that stand out for me. So I think this week, obviously, the likes of Man City, Man U and Arsenal all look like they've got really good clean sheet potential. Obviously, we've ruled out Man City a little bit because we don't know what's happening with Edison at this stage. Obviously, if he is deemed fit to play, then we probably wouldn't recommend him because of his price. Whereas if Stefan is guaranteed to play, then he would probably come into the thinking here because he's such good value at 4.4. But the two that we're going to pull out is Leno and De Gea for Arsenal and Man United respectively.
Yeah, two really nice options there, both from a value perspective. And as you said, it really comes down to how likely each of the teams are to keep a clean sheet. And when you look at that list of fixtures, the clear favourites are going to be Man City, Arsenal and Man U. And some people might not like putting their faith in the Arsenal defence, but they're at home to Crystal Palace. On paper, we cannot ignore the fact that's a good fixture. And Leno at 4.9 million is a brilliant pick. And for me, he's probably my favourite pick as it currently stands.
Yeah, and yeah, he's in both of our first initial drafts, isn't he, John?
Exactly. So Leno and De Gea are who we're recommending for the goalkeeper slot. Beyond those two, the options are a little bit weak, but you might find some viable options. Some might be tempted by Newcastle, given Sheffield's lack of goals. But on the flip side, you actually have Newcastle a 9-4, according to the bookies, to actually keep a clean sheet. In other words, Sheffield are more likely to score than not. And with that in mind, you're going to find better value options elsewhere. Yeah, the Newcastle goalkeeper is not cheap. We cannot forget that either. So moving on to defenders, and with similar logic, again, it's going to come down to how likely each team is to keep a clean sheet. Of course, some of the defenders, there is more potential for assists and goals. So who are we looking at there, Kris?
Yeah, so as you said, it's a similar logic around teams. So Man City, Man U and Arsenal are the three teams that we're looking at. So for Man City, obviously, you've got Diaz at 5.8, Cancelo 5.7, and Stones, which is a pretty good value at 5 million now. So he's risen a couple of times. So if we just want to focus on those three first from City's point of view.
Well, I think this week, given how good the Man City fixture is, the Man City slots are really valuable. So I wouldn't be using these carelessly. But when you have, Man City are odds on to keep a clean sheet, which is amazing. So looking at someone like Cancelo or Diaz at 5.7, and if budget's more of an issue, then Stones is an option where he keeps starting and he keeps getting clean sheets. So I think one or two of the Man City defenders is completely viable, completely justified. I think the safest option of those is going to be Diaz. And if you fancy maybe someone with a bit more upside, Cancelo is your man. But I personally like to play it safe and go with Diaz for this fixture. So that's who I'd lean to. Of the other ones you mentioned, so Man United and Arsenal, within Man United, 5.4 million for both Harry Maguire and Wan-Bissaka. Quite a premium price point there.
So Wan-Bissaka is actually 5.3, so a little bit lower, but it is a bit of a premium price point, and they're both players that aren't known for mad attacking returns, but away to Burnley is a nice fixture. They've got a very good chance of keeping a clean sheet in that fixture, according to the bookies. So both nice options. And obviously, as John mentioned about the City slots not being careless, if you wanted to, we're going to talk about De Bruyne and Sterling later on. If you wanted to get a couple of those City players in midfield, then it opens up more spaces for a Man United defence or an Arsenal one, which we'll go through in a minute as well.
Yeah, so I mean, two really good options there. And again, in my first draft, I actually had both of them in, both Wan-Bissaka and Maguire. I think they're both well justified. I mean, then Arsenal, and I think this is where the standout value pick in defence by a clear mile. And I mean, you should really introduce him as the Arsenal fan, but for me, on paper, he's the one that should be in everyone's team.
Yeah, so that's obviously Kieran Tierney. He just had an 18-point haul last week, so obviously people are going a bit mad. I mean, I've watched this guy since last season. He's got huge potential of, more attacking returns than he's provided already. And I think Arsenal's form hasn't helped with that. But obviously Arsenal have taken turned a corner a little bit recently. 3 wins on the bounce. He looks to be, previously he's played in the 3 at the back and one of the centre-back positions. Whereas now he's playing in a more confident Arsenal team. He's been given freedom to go forward, playing this favoured left-back position. He's looked really threatening. And at 5.3, he's probably going to be one of the first names on the team sheet, isn't he, really?
Yeah, I think I think he quite literally was. Brilliant pick. And if you want another way into the Arsenal defence, I mean, you don't even want to, even at a lower cost than 5.3 for quite a high expected point total for this week, you've got the likes of Bellerin and even better Holding at an amazing price tag of 4.5 million. So I think Tierney's the one to prioritise, and then also freeing up funds elsewhere. You have the option of going with Holding as probably the number 2 best option for Arsenal.
Yeah, agree with that. We should just mention before we move on to midfield. So we found a little, difference between the app and the website. So Barry Douglas is currently 3.8 million on the website, whereas he's not. I don't know if he's on the app or not, but I know that 3.9 is the lowest on the app. So if you are 0.1 short of creating your ultimate free hit team, Barry Douglas is your man at 3.8.
First name on the team sheet, Barry Douglas. Right. So on to the midfield. And I think this is where we both agree that you should be spending all of your money. This is where all the premium assets are. I mean, when you're looking at the teams that we want to be targeting the most this week, which are Man City, Man U, and Arsenal, and in this, Spurs, we can't ignore the Spurs attacking potential. Then it's obviously going to bring up lots of good options. So start with Man City, 2 really good players. Obviously, KDB, who for me is going to be a huge captaincy contender and near enough essential for this week, in my opinion. And then if you fancy someone with a great deal of upside and goal potential, Raheem Sterling, again, going to be an amazing pick for this week. Great chance of scoring a goal. On paper, City are heavy favourites. We're going to know the goal score odds a bit closer to it, but you're going to see these guys as kind of topping the charts in terms of expected points.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's obviously a little bit of a worry, as always, with Pep roulette and rotation. Obviously, Sterling started the last 6 games, played 90 minutes in every single one of them. But that's not always a guarantee that he's going to start. I think KDB is always a bit more guaranteed to get the start. So, he should be the ultimate priority from a City perspective. But Sterling still represents really good value against a Brighton team that are short on confidence and conceding a few goals as well. So both, extremely good options this week.
Yeah. Just a note on those two. I mean, lots of people look at their budget and be, how can I fit in the 2 of those guys with some of the other players they want in? I think it's perfectly viable to go with one of those 2, KDB, in my opinion, if I was picking, and then at least 2 Man City defenders, so like a Diaz and a Stones. But again, if budget allows you to, I do quite like the idea of doubling down and going KDB and Sterling for maximum firepower. But that's a bit more of a challenge with the budget, and hopefully we're going to help you with that this episode.
Yeah, and we should just mention, obviously, KDB played up front, didn't he, in his last game against Chelsea. So that boosts his, potential attack of returns if he needed more potential anyway. So if we move on to Man United then, following the order. So obviously Bruno and Rashford obviously stand out here. So Bruno is obviously the man in amazing form. Rashford still in pretty decent form as well recently. Yeah.
I mean, we all know that Bruno keeps scoring, and I think There's been times where I should have captained him and been a bit more aggressive with him. He's just keeps on showing up with goals. We know he's on penalties. He's going to be an excellent chance away to Burnley. It's that old Bruno Array record. Whilst it might not make too much sense statistically, he does have this spooky ability to keep scoring on the road, and he should really be considered to go in your team as a top priority. And I think Rashford is also a well-justified pick, slightly cheaper, looking particularly dangerous in lots of the games we've seen. I've got him in my team before the free hit, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So
and
really
I think
nice
Man United are going to be well up for that game. It takes them to top of the league if they win. So and they've looked really good the last few games. Comparing to similar to what they were at the end of last season. Looking really good going forward. So both players, I will probably have in my draft team definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so on to a fixture we haven't mentioned. So Villa Spurs, and this is actually a very competitive fixture. The bookies have these teams quite level, but the bookies also are expecting goals in this one. So Harry Kane and Son are still going to be pretty likely to score. Obviously their form is incredible, as we all know, and I think they're a well-justified pick for this week. If the Villa team wasn't so strong at the moment, they'd be absolutely essential. But I think bringing in at least one of them is going to be pretty important for this week. They're not cheap, but they're going to be one of the best options on paper. And I've jumped ahead to a striker, I realise, but let's focus on Son here. He kind of picks himself in many people's teams if you go by form. He's an exceptionally good option for this week.
Yeah, and he's still ridiculously good value, really, at 9.7. He's obviously the top FPL scorer this season so far. And when you compare him to the likes of Aubameyang, Fernandes, De Bruyne, Sterling, they're all 2 million or roughly 2 million more expensive than him. He's insane value. And out of the two, obviously you mentioned Kane already. I would probably prioritise Son just based on the funds, but great option. I think the only thing that does put me off, as you say, is a really competitive fixture, but I do expect goals, and that pretty much takes us on to Grealish as well. It's still a good option at 7.7.
Yeah, I think Villa might be a little bit overlooked in this one. The Villa attacking threat is so strong right now, and we know that Grealish is pivotal to that. So I think he's certainly a justified pick. It is a tough fixture for Villa, but with that said, he's going to go in with quite a high ceiling. So I think Grealish might even be seen as a bit of a differential for this week, and a well-justified, more value pick if you're going down the list trying to kind of save money. So I think Grealish would be our kind of first entry in that bracket. Again, if you're looking for even cheaper players in the midfield, we have two more names for you. So another fixture we haven't mentioned, Wolves-Everton. Neto has looked particularly good, and Kris, you had a bit of an eye for him all season, and now's your time to pick him potentially.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously things have been sadly, Raul Jimenez got injured earlier in the season, and it's allowed Neto to play more of an advanced role as well. He has looked really good at times, and obviously a lot of managers favoured the likes of Podence earlier in the season, but I think Neto is firmly the more favourable asset in fantasy football terms at the moment. And he's in good form, and 6 million is really good value.
Yeah, great value. And that takes us on to our last option in the midfield, which is really good value. The dirt cheap price of just 5.2 million. So that's only 0.7 above the base entry of 4.5. And that is Saka for Arsenal, who's been looking better and better, Kris.
Yeah. He's been our best player all season anyway. But obviously, as I said earlier, in a more confident Arsenal team, he's moved over to the right wing, where he's just been given a little bit more freedom, and he's looked more comfortable there, and he's looked really threatening in the last 3 games. Like, he probably could have scored and assisted a few more. So really good value at 5.2, and enables a lot of funds elsewhere to get some of these other premium assets in. Yeah,
for me, he's going to be one of those who I prioritise alongside holding it just 4.5. They're just amazing value given the fixture. Arsenal at home to Palace, 2 in-form players. It's really nice options at their price point. So that does take us on to the strikers. And just before we go into them, it's worth saying, in terms of the attacking potential, I really feel midfield is king this week. When you look at it's just stacked with all the premium options, and you also have some nicer kind of value options. We will go through the forwards, of course, and there's some nice options here. But in terms of the true value, I still feel it sits in the midfield. But starting off at the top end, we talked about Spurs. I've already went on about him a bit, and that is Harry Kane at 11 million. He's not cheap, but he's obviously integral to that team. We know he's on penalties, which he scored last week, and he's still got that connection with Son, where if Son does something, Kane's probably got something to do with it, and vice versa. Yeah. So nice option there, Kris.
Yeah, nothing more to say on that. Yeah, he is the only premium striker to pick out this week.
Further down, so the 8 mil bracket.
Yeah, there's obviously Lacazette, 5 goals in his last 4 games. Looked, again, really good down the middle of the last few games. And there's obviously a question for me, anyway, as an Arsenal fan, if Aubameyang potentially comes out of the team, I don't think there's a guarantee that he's going to start, which then means that Lacazette will be on penalties. I do think he probably will start, which means that Aubameyang will be on penalties, which does reduce his value a little bit, but he is the man in form, and at 8.2 million, it's really nice value if you want to get into that Arsenal attack.
So a nice price point there, definitely. And I think some people will be considering Martial as well, who's probably he's definitely a viable pick. I think he's certainly not a bad pick for this week at all. I still think there's a bit more upside to Bruno, followed by Rashford, and then Martial. But he's looked really dangerous. I believe he scored in his last game, but was that his second goal of the season? I mean, it's not an impressive record for a striker.
No, but yes, the 2 goals and a few assists. But obviously, a benefit to him this next game is that obviously Cavani's been banned for 3 games, which would, I think, obviously the League Cup game and then the Burnley game would be his last game that he was banned. So it means that Martial is pretty much guaranteed to start, and he has looked in more form, in better form the last 4 or 5 games. He's had some good attacking returns. So yeah, I wouldn't rule him out at 8.7. I just think at 8.2 Lacazette represents better value, but if you've already got 3 Arsenal players elsewhere and you need another Man U slot in the striker position, then Martial's decent.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of question. I think I'd rather have someone like Wan-Bissaka or Harry Maguire playing instead of Martial, obviously at a much cheaper price point, and just adjusting my formation to something like a 4-4-2 or even a 5-4-1 in some instances. But he's not a bad option by any stretch. And the final one on our list, so a bit more of a value. Oh, sorry, we have two forwards left on the list. So in the 6 mil bracket. So Callum Wilson, I think lots of people will have been onto him already, being against the weak Sheffield side, and Ollie Watkins, who seems to be underperforming quite considerably this season, but is still pivotal to Villa's attacking threat.
Yeah, I think touching on Watkins first, I think he's probably been a little bit unlucky. Like he's been getting the chances, but sometimes it's been a good save or he's just not being clinical enough. But I think the key thing is that he is getting the chances and that Villa create so many chances, mainly Grealish being the one who creates the chances. So there's no doubt that he will get a couple of chances in that game against Spurs. But whether he can put them away, that's another question. I prefer the value in Wilson just because Sheffield have been in such poor form. 2 points all season is so poor. One of the worst defences in the league. Wilson is on penalties. Newcastle have looked fairly impressive recently. They were a little bit unlucky against Leicester, drew against Liverpool.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because going by the eye test, I think we'd both agree that Wilson looks the best option of the two. If you go by bookie odds as it currently stands, Watkins goes in as a higher percentage to score any time. And if you're looking at kind of predicted points models, again, they favour Ollie Watkins. So I don't think anyone should just quickly pencil in Wilson without considering some of the other options there, because there are other good options in that bracket. But there's two kind of better price strikers for you. Again, do I favour some of the more premium defenders over the likes of Wilson and Watkins? And I think I do lean towards someone like Diaz at 5.7, so for an even cheaper price. So there's a few tough decisions to make, but we generally feel that if you build a team based around the players we've mentioned, which is perfectly achievable. Both of our current drafts exclusively feature these players, only these players, and they're both looking pretty good. We're feeling at this stage. I mean, any final thoughts on our list of players, Kris?
No, I think that's you've covered it there, John. And I think we will release a episode later in the week to confirm our final drafts, or as close to as it is at the final end of this week, and then hopefully that will give you what you want. But obviously, any questions you've got, just pop them down below, and we'll be able to answer them as best we can.
Good luck building your free hit teams, and thanks for watching.
Cheers, guys. See you later.